All right, let's do the your turns. So for finding the volume of each cylinder, show plugging in to the formula, okay? Then use your calculator. So we are going to learn about a couple other shapes in this chapter. So you need to know which formula goes with which shape. So the first thing you should always write down is the formula. So the formula is pi r squared h for a volume of the cylinder. All right, now we need to identify these parts. We need to identify the radius and the height. So if you look at the picture, we can see that this 10 inches is referring to the distance across the circle through that center. So that means that's the diameter. So the diameter is 10 inches. But we need to find the radius. Remember that the diameter is equal to twice the radius, or you can think of it as the radius is equal to half the diameter. So if we know the diameter is 10, what's half of 10? It's 5. So the radius is 5 inches. The labels are really important here. Because remember, when we have area, that's two-dimensional, so that is units squared. And volume is three-dimensional, so that's units cubed. So again, one dimension is going to be units, just the first power. The two-dimensional objects, that's finding the area, will be always units squared. U stands for units. And then 3D, the volume will always be units cubed. So that's really important to remember when it comes to doing your answers. So we use the word units or U for units when we don't know the unit of measurement. So in this case we do. We know that it's inches, so we're going to use inches. And I'll show you how we can easily get this by actually just utilizing the fact that we have labels. Okay, so we identified the radius. We found it after identifying diameter. Now let's identify the height. The height is this 6 inches. This is referring to the height of the cylinder. So this is always good to do, is to write it out so it's really clear what you're doing with those numbers. So it's you identifying them, and then for me, I can see exactly what you're thinking if you're identifying those parts. It's just good practice to do that. So let's plug it into the formula. So V is equal to, let's go ahead and use pi right now. And then we're going to go ahead and put a multiplication sign here because when we have symbols like pi and a variable next to each other, it's not necessary that you have an operation. It's assumed to be multiplication. But when we stick a number there, it looks really weird if we were just to put pi 5. Now, if 5 was in the front, it would be okay. 5 pi, that would be acceptable. It's like a coefficient in that case, so it would be like kind of like 5x, but 5 pi. So when it follows, though, like it wouldn't make sense to say x5, right, or y5. So pi 5 doesn't make sense either. It's just not the notation we use. So we are going to utilize dot multiplication here. You can use an x if you want. It's just going to get confusing when we have variables like x thrown in there. Okay, so it's 5 squared, and then times again the h, which is 6. Okay, now we just have to evaluate using order of operations. So we're going to deal with the pi in a minute. So we are going to use our calculator, but I want to show you how to do it by leaving in terms of pi is what we call it. So we can do 5 squared, which is 25. So it's going to be pi times, I'm replacing 5 squared with 25, then times 6, and then 25 times 6 is 150. So it'd be pi times 150. So it's actually 150 pi, or 150 times pi. So this is our answer left in terms of pi is what we call it. We leave it in terms of pi, meaning we don't actually multiply the pi out because it's an irrational number. This whole thing's irrational, and so we don't want an estimate. If you want the exact answer, and you will have this a ton in geometry, if you want the exact answer, you leave it here, 150 pi. And we want to put the label, because it's volume, it's the label cubed, so that's inches cubed in this case. So that's the answer left in terms of pi. Now, we didn't ask you to actually do that, but I wanted to show you. So if we weren't leaving it in terms of pi, we would just take that 150 and times it by pi. So you can use the estimate if you want, which we tell you to do, 3.14. So 150 times 3.14 is 471. So 471 inches cubed. And so we didn't have to round our answer nearest 10th since it was exact. But here's the thing, it's actually not exact because pi is an irrational number. It goes on forever, so this number shouldn't actually terminate. So what happens when you use actual pi? If you go on to Google or something like that and you use pi, it will give you exactly pi. So if you choose not to type in 3.14 but just do 150 times pi, it'll do all of pi for you, and you'll do it in the calculator too, and I'll make a little video to show you how to do that on the calculator. So 150 times pi, really, so this is with, I'm going to write that this is with actual pi, which is technically the better answer, the more correct answer, is with actual pi, is 471 point, if we round to the nearest tenth, be 0.2, and then inches cubed. As your numbers get bigger, this rounding will be a lot different. So these two answers really aren't that far off. But the bigger number you multiply by pi, the larger you're going to be off. It can be off by a huge margin if you choose to just use 3.14 and not actual pi. That's why using actual pi is preferred. So right now I would say if you got this answer, you're good. You use the formula, you use 3.14, it's great. Make sure you have inches cubed. This is more advanced, using actual pi, and this is the most advanced, leaving it in terms of pi. Real quick, I just want to show you why the label is inches cubed here. If you actually put in the labels here, so if you took this, where you plugged it in, if you actually put labels in there, be v equals pi times 5 inches squared times 6 inches, look what you have here. Inches squared, inches times inches. This will be 5 inches times 5 inches is not 25, it's 25 inches squared. So this is inches squared. Times it by another inch, that's inches cubed. So if you leave your labels in there, you'll never mess up what the label is supposed to be. Okay, so that's your final answer right there, 471 inches cubed. All right, for this next one, I'll do a little quicker, won't go into as much detail. So again, formula V equals pi r squared h. Let's identify the radius. So 4 feet, it's referring to the center to the edge. That's what we call the radius. So the radius is 4 feet. And then the height, even though it's laid on its side, this is the height. Okay, so you could turn it on its side like this one. This is the height. Because you can imagine if you flip it around, remember it's kind of like you had the base and then a bunch of them stacked on top of each other. So how many? So the height is 12 feet. And then we just plug it in. So V is equal to pi times, I'm just going to use the numbers this time, 4 squared times 12. And then if we change that to 3.14, and then all you do is type this whole thing in your calculator. That's another way you can do it. And then you shouldn't have any errors with order of operations. So just make sure you're using multiplication signs when you plug it into the calculator. And you need to be careful if you're doing it on the computer to make sure order of operations is being followed. So you will get V is equal to 602.88. And just remember that the label is cubed, so it's feet this time, not inches. So it's feet cubed. I suggest doing as much as you can by hand. So we know that 4 squared is 16, and this helps you practice order of operations. So it'd be 3.14 times 16 times 12. And then you can do this easily. 16 times 12 is 192, so it's 3.14 times 192. And then that'll get you to that answer again. And then I also like doing it that way because that 192 is being multiplied by pi. So if you want to leave it in terms of pi, then it's just 192 pi. And the label, again, is feet cubed. Now, if we use actual pi, type in 192, this is another reason I like for you to do this part without pi first and get that number, is now we can do 192 times actual pi and not an estimate of 3.14, and you get 603, 603.2. So look, that's actually a bigger difference than it was over here. Well, over here, it's a bigger difference because we had a bigger number. So the larger your number gets that you multiply by pi, the bigger the difference between you using actual pi and the estimate. So again, this is the basic answer, that this is minimum expectation right here. This is a little more advanced. This is the most advanced. All right, thanks for watching.